In 2021, someone looked at the Las Vegas Strip and decided to build anyway. Not a small project, not a boutique hotel tucked between existing properties, not a cautious bet hedged with exit strategies. A $4.3 billion mega resort at 3,500 rooms stacked into towers that pierce the desert sky, 117,000 square feet of casino floor. The first ground-up casino development on the Strip in over a decade. Resorts World Las Vegas, rising on the North Strip like a declaration of faith in a city that was bleeding out. The timing was insane. The pandemic had just hollowed out the industry. Tourists had fled to alternatives. The Strip was drowning in empty rooms. Every warning sign was flashing red oversupply, declining demand, the entire business model under pressure. And into that chaos, someone poured $4.3 billion into a new building. The biggest bet on Vegas in a generation, made at possibly the worst moment in Strip history. 2 years later, the gamble isn't paying off. The billions are at risk. And the company that bet everything on Vegas is discovering what the smart money already knew. There's a reason nobody else was building. Today I'm showing you the Resorts World gamble. Why a Malaysian gaming giant thought it could succeed where others feared to build. What made them look at a struggling Strip and see opportunity instead of catastrophe. The confidence or arrogance required to bet $4.3 billion on a market in crisis. What went wrong almost immediately? The brand problem, the timing problem, the supply problem that Resorts World didn't solve but made worse. And what happens when a bet this size starts going bad? The debt, the pressure, the scenarios that range from painful to catastrophic. The biggest new casino on the Strip, the billions hanging in the balance, the gamble that might define whether anyone ever builds here again. If you're new here, I expose the bets that are failing on the Strip. Not the press releases about grand openings and celebrity appearances and ribbon cuttings, the economics underneath, the debt loads that determine whether buildings survive, the occupancy rates that reveal whether anyone's actually showing up. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications. Because Resorts World isn't just one company's problem, it's a stress test for the entire Strip's future. If a $4.3 billion bet by a well-capitalized operator can't succeed here, who would ever build again? What does that say about Vegas's next chapter? The answer might be playing out right now. Let me show you who made this bet, because understanding the gambler explains the gamble. This wasn't some Vegas insider who grew up in the industry. Wasn't an American operator who understood the market intimately. Wasn't someone who'd spent decades learning how the Strip actually works. This was a company from the other side of the world, betting billions on a market they'd never operated in, building a brand in a country where nobody knew their name, entering the most competitive casino market on earth with zero local experience, and doing it at a moment when every signal said don't. Genting Group. If you're American, you've probably never heard of them. Most Vegas tourists haven't either. That's the first problem, but we'll get there. Genting is a Malaysian conglomerate, one of the largest casino operators in Asia, an empire spanning Singapore, Malaysia, the Philippines, the Bahamas, resorts that print money in markets where the Genting name means luxury and gaming and the high life. In Asia, Genting is a giant. In America, a complete unknown. They'd never operated a casino in the United States, never navigated Nevada gaming regulators, never competed against MGM and Caesars on their home turf. Never had to build a brand from zero in a market where tourists choose hotels based on names they've known since childhood. But they saw opportunity, or thought they did. A vacant lot on the North Strip, the old Stardust site, legendary property, imploded in 2007, sitting empty ever since because nobody else would touch it. Land they could buy when others wouldn't. A chance to enter the most famous casino market on earth. The logic probably seemed sound in a boardroom in Kuala Lumpur. Vegas is Vegas. Build something impressive enough and they will come. The name will build itself. So they bet. And they bet big. $4.3 billion. Let that number settle. $4.3 billion. The GDP of a small country. More than the entire annual budget of some American states. Enough money to solve problems that seem unsolvable. All of it poured into a single building on the Las Vegas Strip. 3,500 rooms across 3 towers. Hilton, Conrad, and Crockford's brands stacked into one development. 117,000 square feet of casino floor, a 5,000-seat theater, a massive LED screen wrapping the exterior, the largest in North America, visible for miles, turning the building into a glowing billboard every night. The building is genuinely impressive. Stand at the corner of Las Vegas Boulevard and look up. The scale is undeniable. The LED screen pulses with color, with motion, with the sense that something significant was built here. It looks like a billion-dollar property because it cost more than 4 times that. The construction took years. The pandemic hit in the middle, supply chain chaos, worker shortages, costs spiraling, the budget ballooned, the timeline stretched. And when Resorts World finally opened in June 2021, it opened into a Las Vegas that was fundamentally different from the one Genting had bet on. The tourists had changed, fewer of them, different expectations, less willing to gamble, more sensitive to price. The premium customer that Vegas used to depend on scattered to alternatives or staying home. The economics had changed. The Strip was already oversupplied with rooms, already bleeding cash, already watching occupancy rates that couldn't justify the infrastructure built for better times. And into that struggling market, Resorts World dropped 3,500 new rooms that needed to be filled. Rooms that would have to steal guests from Wynn across the street, from Venetian next door, from every established property that now had a new competitor. The Strip didn't need more rooms. Resorts World built them anyway. The gamble was placed. The dice were rolling. $4.3 billion committed to a building that couldn't be unbuilt. A bet that couldn't be unwound. And almost immediately, the numbers started coming up wrong. The brand wasn't building. The rooms weren't filling at the rates needed. The competition was brutal. Genting had walked into a knife fight with a company brochure, and the knives were already out. Resorts World opened to fanfare, the kind of grand opening Vegas does better than anywhere. The LED exterior lit up the Strip, a new landmark, impossible to ignore. That massive screen cycling through colors visible from airplanes descending into McCarran. Celebrities showed up, cameras flashed, press coverage glowed with the excitement of something new. The building looked like success. The numbers told a different story. And almost immediately, reality arrived. Let me show you why the gamble is failing. Nobody knows who Genting is. That's the first problem, the foundational problem, the problem that $4.3 billion couldn't solve. American tourists booking Vegas don't recognize the name. They've never heard of Resorts World. It means nothing to them, carries no mythology, triggers no memories. Doesn't appear in movies they've watched, or stories their parents told, or dreams they've had since childhood. It's not Bellagio, the fountains, the heist movies, the sense of arrival. It's not Caesar's 60 years of brand building, the fights, the spectacle, the name that means Vegas to 3 generations. It's not Venetian, or Wynn, or even Mandalay Bay. It's a name that sounds vaguely like a cruise line, built by a company from Malaysia, filled with brands like Conrad and Crockfords that mean something in Asia and Europe and absolutely nothing in Kansas City. Brand matters enormously in Vegas. Enormously. When a tourist has 50 hotel options on the Strip, they default to names they trust, names that signal something, names they can picture, can imagine, can already feel before they arrive. Resorts World is starting from zero. Every single guest has to be convinced. Every booking has to overcome the fundamental question, why would I stay somewhere I've never heard of when I could stay at the Bellagio? Building a brand takes decades. Genting thought they could buy their way to relevance, spend enough on marketing, book enough celebrities, make enough noise. They're discovering you can't. You can't purchase 60 years of cultural presence. You can't manufacture the mythology that makes tourists choose one property over another. The brand problem would be manageable if the market was hungry for rooms, if tourists were flooding Vegas and every property was sold out, if Resorts World was filling a gap, but there is no gap, there's an oversupply. And Resorts World didn't fill a hole, it dug a deeper one. Resorts World added 3,500 rooms to a market that already had too many rooms. This is simple math, brutal math, the kind of math that doesn't care how beautiful your building is or how much you spend on it. The Strip was already struggling with occupancy before the pandemic. Hotels running 60–70% full on weeknights. Empty rooms everywhere except the biggest weekends. Revenue per room declining as properties competed for tourists who weren't showing up. The pandemic made it worse, much worse. Hollowed out the industry, changed travel patterns, taught tourists they could gamble on their phones, vacation in other cities, skip Vegas entirely. The recovery has been uneven at best. Tourists came back, some of them, but not at the levels Vegas was built for. Not at the levels that justify the room inventory that already existed. And into this struggling market, Resorts World dropped 3,500 new rooms. Rooms that need to be filled. Rooms that need guests. Rooms that have to be sold every single night to generate the revenue that services $4.3 billion in investment. To fill those rooms, Resorts World has to take guests from somewhere. That's how a fixed market works. There isn't a hidden pool of tourists waiting for a new option. The total number of Vegas visitors isn't expanding because a new building opened. The pie is the size it is. Every guest at Resorts World is a guest, not at Wynn, not at Venetian, not at Encore. Every room they fill is a room that stays empty somewhere else. And the established properties aren't going quietly, they're fighting back, matching rates, offering deals, using their brand advantage to remind tourists why they should stay somewhere familiar. The price war was inevitable, and Resorts World is losing it. To fill rooms, Resorts World discounts, offers rates that undercut the market, slashes prices on booking sites, runs promotions that border on desperate. You can find Resorts World rooms for prices that seem impossible given what the building cost. $300 rooms going for $150, premium suites at mid-tier rates. The kind of deals that make you wonder if something's wrong. Something is wrong. The discounting is a symptom of the disease. The rooms aren't filling at full price. The brand isn't commanding premiums. The $4.3 billion building is competing on price like a budget property. And every discount drags down the whole market. When Resorts World offers rooms at $150, Wynn has to respond. Venetian has to respond. Everyone's rates compress. Everyone's revenue suffers. The price wars we've covered in other videos? Resorts World is a major driver. The new building that was supposed to add value to the Strip is actively destroying value for everyone, including itself. And then there's where they built it. Geography. The factor that can't be changed, no matter how much you spend. The North Strip. Not the center of the action, not walkable to Bellagio or Caesars or the dense cluster where tourists naturally congregate. Better than the Strat, much better, closer to Wynn and Venetian, part of a mini cluster forming on the north end, but still on the edge. Still requiring guests to choose a property that's slightly less convenient. Still fighting the perception that the real Strip is somewhere else. The location isn't fatal. It's not the Strat nightmare, but it's another headwind. Another factor working against a property that already has the brand problem and the timing problem and the oversupply problem. Another weight on a bet that's already struggling to stay above water. No brand recognition in a market driven by brands. Wrong timing in a market drowning in rooms. Price wars that destroy value for everyone, including yourself. A location that's good, but not great. Resorts World is fighting headwinds on every front. Every single factor that determines success in Vegas is working against them. The building is beautiful, genuinely impressive. That LED screen is stunning. Stand outside at night and watch it cycle through its displays, and you'll understand where some of that $4.3 billion went. The rooms are nice. The amenities are competitive. But beautiful doesn't matter when the economics don't work. Nice rooms don't matter when you're discounting them to fill them. Stunning LED screens don't pay debt service. The rooms aren't filling at the rates needed. The brand isn't building fast enough. The competition from established properties is brutal and unrelenting. Every month is a fight just to stay operational. The gamble isn't just struggling, it's starting to look like it might fail. And $4.3 billion doesn't fail quietly. $4.3 billion fails catastrophically. The question now isn't whether Resorts World is in trouble. It clearly is. The question is what happens next, what the options are, and how bad this could get. $4.3 billion doesn't just disappear. That money came from somewhere. It's owed to someone. And if Resorts World can't generate the returns to service that investment, consequences follow. Real consequences, painful consequences, the kind that reshape companies and send signals through entire industries. Let me show you what's at stake and what failure actually looks like for a bet this size. Resorts World was financed with massive debt. Billions borrowed against the assumption that the property would print money, that the rooms would fill, that the casino would generate, that the investment would pay for itself and then some. Loans that require regular payments, interest that compounds whether the casino is full or empty, covenants that demand certain performance metrics, miss them, and the lenders get nervous, miss them repeatedly, and the lenders get aggressive. The building exists, the debt exists, the gap between what the building generates and what the debt demands that gap is the crisis. When a property underperforms, debt becomes a strangler. Every dollar that should go to marketing, to improvements, to competing effectively, it goes to lenders instead. The same doom loop we've seen at Caesars, the same trap that's crushing properties across the Strip. The debt eating the future, the investment demanding returns that don't exist, the math that doesn't care about grand opening press releases. Genting has deep pockets. They're not a small operator who folds at the first sign of trouble. They're a multinational conglomerate with resorts across Asia, generating real revenue. They can absorb losses, they can be patient, they can feed the machine longer than most. But even deep pockets have bottoms. Even patient investors eventually demand returns. Even corporate parents get tired of sending money to a child that won't stop bleeding. The question isn't whether Resorts World is struggling, it clearly is. The question is how long Genting keeps feeding the machine. How long they absorb the losses. How long before the math forces a decision no one wants to make. Scenario 1. Genting doubles down, commits to the long game, pours more money in. More marketing, bigger celebrity partnerships, aggressive promotions to build the brand, the belief that eventually, maybe years from now, the investment pays off, that the name becomes known, that the rooms fill at the rates they need. This requires extraordinary patience, years of losses, hundreds of millions more, maybe billions, thrown after the original billions. The corporate parent in Malaysia explaining to shareholders why an American casino keeps bleeding while Asian properties print money. And no guarantee it works. You can't force tourists to choose a brand they don't recognize. You can't manufacture decades of cultural presence in a few years. You might double down and still lose, just lose more. Doubling down is expensive and risky and might not work. But the alternatives aren't better, because if Genting decides the bleeding has to stop, the options get ugly fast. Selling a $4.3 billion building at a loss, finding a buyer for a struggling property in a struggling market, admitting publicly, financially, catastrophically that the gamble failed. Scenario 2. Genting sells, cuts losses, finds a buyer willing to take on a property that isn't working. Who buys it? That's the question that makes executives sweat. MGM already owns most of the Strip. Bellagio, Aria, Cosmopolitan, the Mirage site. They don't need another massive property, especially one struggling to fill rooms. Caesars is drowning in $12 billion of their own debt. They can barely maintain the properties they have. They're not buying anything. Private equity? Maybe. Distressed asset funds love buying other people's failures at discounts, but they demand a brutal price. 50 cents on the dollar, maybe less. A $4.3 billion building selling for $2 billion or less. Genting would take a catastrophic loss. Billions wiped out. The American expansion dream dead. The shareholders wondering why they ever let management make this bet. Scenario 3. The unthinkable. The outcome no one wants to say out loud. Restructuring, default, the property changing hands not through a clean sale, but through financial distress, lawyers and creditors, and bankruptcy courts. The biggest new casino on the Strip becoming the biggest failure in modern Vegas history, a $4.3 billion monument to hubris. Not likely. Genting probably has the resources to avoid this, but not impossible either if the bleeding continues long enough, if the losses compound, if patience runs out and alternatives disappear. The unthinkable becomes thinkable when the math stops working entirely. Whatever happens to Resorts World sends a signal, a loud one, to everyone watching Vegas, to every developer who might consider building on the Strip, to every investor who might fund a new project, to every company thinking about entering the Las Vegas market. If Resorts World fails, if a $4.3 billion bet by a well-capitalized operator can't succeed, who would ever build here again? Why would anyone take that risk? The Resorts World gamble isn't just about one building. It's a referendum on whether the Strip can support new development, whether Vegas has growth left in it, whether the future is expansion or managed decline. If Genting can't make it work with $4.3 billion in deep pockets and patience, the signal is clear. Don't build. The market is saturated. The tourists aren't coming. New properties are bets against the math. The Resorts World gamble was bold, audacious, the kind of bet that either looks visionary in hindsight or catastrophically stupid. There's no middle ground when you wager $4.3 billion. Right now, it's looking like the latter. The rooms aren't filling at the rates needed. The brand isn't building fast enough. The competition from established properties is brutal and getting worse. The price wars continue. The economics don't work. $4.3 billion committed, returns that don't justify the commitment, a company discovering that Vegas isn't just another market, that the Strip doesn't welcome outsiders, that 60 years of brand building can't be purchased with a single spectacular building. The LED screen still lights up the Strip every night, that massive display cycling through colors and patterns, visible for miles, the technological wonder that announced Resorts World's arrival. The building still impresses tourists who drive past. The scale, the newness, the sense that something significant was built here. But behind the LED screen, the numbers tell a different story. The discounted rooms, the price wars, the debt service due, the quarterly pressure, the quiet conversations about what happens if this doesn't turn around. $4.3 billion at risk. A company's American dreams hanging in the balance. A gamble that might define whether anyone bets on Vegas again. The dice are still rolling, but the numbers aren't looking good, and even Genting's deep pockets can only last so long. Hit subscribe to track the gamble. I'm watching Resorts World. The occupancy whispers, the rate discounting, the ownership signals, every quarterly report, every hint of whether this bet stabilizes or spirals. Drop a comment. Have you stayed at Resorts World? Did it feel like a property finding its footing or a property struggling to survive? Did the experience match the building's promise? Would you choose it over Wynn or Venetian next door? Because the Strip's future might depend on what happens to this building. If Resorts World succeeds, maybe Vegas has another chapter. Maybe new development makes sense. Maybe the market can absorb growth. If it fails, the signal echoes everywhere. Don't build, don't invest, don't bet on Vegas. Right now, the dice are still rolling. The gamble hasn't resolved. $4.3 billion hanging in the balance while the Strip watches to see how it lands. I'll see you in the next one.